Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. I'm Christy Lowe, I'm your host, and I'm so glad you're back with us again this week. If you have been following along, we've been talking about control issues, manipulation, feeling out of control, lots and lots of things to do with control for the past, well, now we're coming up on 4 weeks. So for the past month, that's what we've been talking about. And, a lot of y'all know, if you've been listening to, my dad had a heart attack about, just days after I recorded the first episode about control. And so the Lord has done a real time life lesson with me and learning about this for the past month. And I can tell you with all certainty that if it were not for him, I would not have made it through this season. And I am so grateful for, although the pain of what we have been through, and I would not wish this on anybody, man, I can so beautifully see what the Lord has been doing in my life, not only through the study of this, but also just in watching my dad go through the heart attack and now subsequently in rehab and hospital, getting him moved up here. It's been a wild ride, y'all. I wanted, before we dive into this week's conversation, which is a breath of fresh air, if you want my opinion, I want to clarify something, because last week, y'all, I went back and listened to last week's episode. And I don't know if any of you are teachers, you're going to understand this. Whenever I was a teacher and I would teach a lesson, you would teach the same lesson 6 or 7 class periods if you were in junior high or high school, and that's what I taught. And there would inevitably be like class periods where they would leave and I would think, oh my gosh, I forgot to explain this to those kids. And so I'd have to make a note like, oh, make sure you explain this part, of photosynthesis to them whenever they come back tomorrow. And I feel like I owe you an asterisk and just a side note here, because y'all, I dove into last week's episode without even so much as an introduction. I mean, now all of you nosy Nellies who haven't listened to it are going to probably go back and check it out, because you're like, oh, really? What'd she do? Well, I think last week we were talking about manipulation. Okay. There's a part of King David's story where he and Bathsheba, obviously that a lot of us know that story about his adultery and then subsequent pregnancy that came from that. And we talked about that last week. But what I did not do a very good job of at all was setting up the story. And one of the things that I have held very deeply within me for a long time is just what a beautiful story David's entire life is, and how much he is truly a man after God's own heart. He was the king that came after Saul. He was the anointed one that came from Jesse's family in Bethlehem. He is a beautiful representation of I think, and in a lot of ways, just the future king that would come in Jesus. And and when I say all of that, I just kind of skipped ahead and was like, hey, everybody, we're going to talk about David and Bathsheba. Here we go. Boom. And I just jumped right in and really did not lead in with how much respect I have for him. And so in some regards, when I was listening to last week's episode, I do go back and listen to him, because I do want to know what you hear. And sometimes I'll fully confess there are times where I'm like, oh, dang, I said that, man, I'm learning. My own words are teaching me something, because a lot of times you just forget what you say. And so when I was listening to it, I just thought, oh my goodness, I really did not set this up very well. So that being said, David really got a bad rap last week. He is truly a man after God's own heart. And just like we don't want to be judged for our worst mistakes or only see part of our lives, we want our whole story to be known. We don't just want the bad highlight reel to be the reason why people know us. And so I think it is important for us today to take a moment and let's give David the opportunity to be redeemed today, because he is such a incredible man of God and an incredible character. And I can't wait to show you something that the Lord just showed me. And I thought, okay, we've got to talk about this, because this is such a beautiful way to wrap up. Yes, I said wrap up this conversation about being a control freak, but then also a part of last week's conversation prompted what he wants to talk about next, which is awesome. And I cannot wait to share that with you. So hold tight to the end of today's conversation for a little sneak peek about that. There's a quote that I've got written down on a trusty, rusty sticky note, and it's from C.S. Lewis, and it says, "We are not necessarily doubting that God will do the best for us. We are wondering how painful the best will turn out to be." And I thought of David immediately when I read that, because David was promised, I want to set this up. I'm going to do a better job setting up today for y'all. When David was anointed to be king, like whenever Samuel, the prophet, anointed him as king, Saul was still in power, okay? And yet, if you've ever studied King David's life in 1st and 2nd Samuel, it's beautiful. David went through a lot in that season of life between being anointed and then coming into power as king. And we're going to take a look at a slice of that today. But when I read that C.S. Lewis quote, I thought of David because he believed that the Lord held the best for him, but it was a really painful road. It was not, hey, you're going to be king, and then bam, there you go, he was king. And I'm going to fill you in a little bit on that today. I think that that's us, though. I think we believe that God is going to have our best. I really do. I believe that a lot of us don't necessarily struggle with believing that God holds our best. It's just that often we would rather opt out of the pain that often comes with persevering in the difficult seasons that he has called us to walk through. Does that make sense? And no one knew that better than King David. I want to take you back just a little bit and show you something that I found remarkable about King David, and just how beautifully I think it wraps up what we have been talking about here. In 1 Samuel 24, there is a story between the time that David has been anointed and the time that he takes over as king. And in that time, Saul was pursuing him, and he was, when I say insanely jealous of David, I mean like literally insanely jealous of David, y'all. And he pursued him, tried to kill him. He was murderous toward David, and David was on the run, lived in caves, found shelter and protection in the wilderness and in small town. He was on the run. Like, he would go, people would protect him and help him, and then Saul would get wind of where he was, and then he would have to take off again. Well, this goes on for a while, and then in 1 Samuel 24, there is a moment where Saul actually catches up to David. And he is in a cave relieving himself. Saul is in a cave relieving himself. And David is actually in the back of the cave. Okay? And from the outside looking in, if this was you and you knew that there was a guy trying to kill you, and you look up and there he is, in the cave, just meters or yards away from you, and you have the advantage. Okay, imagine that. Imagine being David on the run, and then boom, there is Saul right there. And instead of sneaking up and killing Saul, he sneaks up and he cuts off a corner of Saul's robe without being noticed, creeps back into the back of the cave, and waits for Saul to leave. I got to be honest with you. I'm impressed with David here. I don't know there's many of us that would not have taken advantage of that opportunity had it presented itself to us. And I think the only way that that happens is if we recognize and we are close enough in walking with the Lord that we know when an opportunity is not ours for the taking. You know, there will be times where we'll get a job offer. There will be times where we have the opportunity to go do something we have always wanted to go do. There are times where we have the opportunity to finally get to blank, fill in the blank, the thing you've always wanted, the job you've always wanted, the life, the lifestyle. There's a lot of things that in our minds we want. And when an opportunity comes along, if we are not walking really close with the Lord, we may not recognize whether or not this is the opportunity for us to take or to not take. And a woman of God that is seeking him, seeks him to know what is and is not hers for the taking, right? And I don't know. I'm so impressed with David here for so many reasons. The first one is just knowing whether or not he should kill him or cut off a corner of his robe. I mean, no offense, but the guy who is crazy and trying to kill me, I mean, he resisted. But he didn't just resist the opportunity to take advantage of the situation. He also resisted what his guys were saying to him. There's, I told you that in that passage, the guys that he's in the cave with are like, dude, this is your chance. And, I think there are times where the people around us are well-meaning, but they may or may not be saying what is coming from the Lord. I think that's why we've got to be so careful about when somebody says, this is what I think you ought to do. Or this is what, my first thought is, well, have you been praying about this? Or is this coming from the gospel of, you? I'm not saying we don't need wise counsel, y'all. Oh my goodness. We have got to have wise counsel. We have got to have people that are praying into our lives and praying over our lives and our decisions. We need those people in our lives. But sometimes it's just noise. And it depends on who you're listening to. And thankfully, David knew and resisted that thought, those guys that were in that cave that were saying, this is the chance, this is your chance. So in verse 5, I'm going to pick up in verse 5. Afterward, David was conscience stricken for having cut off a corner of his robe. He said to his men, Lord forbid that I should do such a thing to my master, the Lord's anointed, or lay my hand on him, for he is the anointed of the Lord. And with these words, he sharply rebuked his men and did not allow them to attack Saul. So Saul left the cave and went on his way. He didn't attack him. And he told his men, no, put your guns away, folks. They didn't have guns back then, y'all, but you know what I mean. Yeah, he said, no, absolutely not. Isn't it awesome when we get the opportunity to feel conscience stricken? And I know you may be like, no, I really don't like that. But I'm just going to tell you that is the Holy Spirit in you that is going, don't do that. Or whenever you get that feeling in your body, when you know that you're doing the wrong thing. I know you know what I'm talking about. Do not pretend that you have not ever gotten to this place in your life where you're like, oh, I shouldn't do that. And when we get those feelings, man, we better, oh God, we've got to hang on to those thoughts whenever we know that that we shouldn't be doing something. That conscience means that we better not be listening to the noise. And we better be getting as close to the Lord as we can, because otherwise we are going to get real far off track. And I don't know if I said this at the beginning, but I think that there are times when the Lord allows us to be tested. I think there are times where the Lord has plans for our lives, but He has to know He can trust us for whatever it is He's calling us into next. And I believe this is one of those moments where David was being tested. The Lord had said that you are the anointed and you will be the next king. And David did not try to take that and make it happen on his timing. And that is pretty darn impressive, y'all, because his life was on the line here. I really do believe, y'all, timing is just everything, is it not? When you think about, like, that time when you could have had a wreck if you had just been 5 minutes later. Or if the time where you, true story, timing wise, just totally random and super fun. But a few years ago, my family and I were at Epcot, at Disney World. We were at Epcot and we were having lunch at Via Napoli in the Italy part of Epcot. We're sitting there and look up, and 2 tables away from us were some friends that our kids went to school with, family that we knew from Lubbock, and they just happened to be there at the same time. We just happened to sit down 2 tables away, and had we been 30 minutes apart, one coming 30 minutes earlier or one coming 30 minutes later, we likely would have missed each other, because y'all, Epcot is huge, and there can literally be up to like 100,000 people there in a day. You could look all day for somebody and never know that they were there. And so the timing of it was just so fun that we got to see our friends and just, hug their necks, and they had been doing some other things and had just gotten there that day. And the timing was just everything there. And timing, y'all, is really, really important. I don't think you could overestimate how important God's timing is over our timing, because y'all, my timing is never as amazing as the Lord's timing. You see this, and going back, David, I know I've talked about Epcot, and now I'm swinging back to David being in a cave, I know a little random there, but you're following with me. I think you're tracking. The end of that story in 1 Samuel, whenever David resists the opportunity to kill him and lets him get away, he goes out of the cave after Saul leaves. Okay. And I just want you to imagine this. Okay. He has the corner of his robe. Okay. He lets Saul get away. And then he goes out of the cave, probably from a safe-ish distance, I would guess. I mean, he's got to be within shouting distance at least. But he lets Saul get out, and then he says, "The Lord, my king." And Saul turns around and he looks behind him, and David is bowed down and prostrated himself, face down on the ground, y'all. Okay? And he says to Saul, "Why do you listen when men say David is bent on harming you? This day you have seen with your own eyes how the Lord delivered you into my hands in that cave. Some urged me to kill you, but I spared you." That's what he said to Saul. He is totally humbling himself here and saying, "Saul, I could have killed you, and I didn't." And then he holds up that piece of the robe and he says, "See, look at this piece of your robe in my hand. I cut off the corner of your robe, but I did not kill you. There is nothing in my hand to indicate that I am guilty of wrongdoing or rebellion. I have not wronged you, but you are hunting me to take my life. And that's the point where Saul is undone by this moment. It doesn't last forever, but in this moment, Saul is undone. And he says, "Is that you, David, my son?" And he wept. And he says, "You are more righteous than I. You have treated me well. I have treated you badly." You can go back and read all of that in 1 Samuel 24. And Saul is just undone by David's integrity and lack of need to control the moment and that he doesn't take advantage of the opportunity before him. And like I said earlier, I believe David passes a test here that the Lord had prompted within him. Are you going to listen to me? And are you going to trust me in this? Are you going to try to do this your way? Or are you going to try to trust me? And, I know this is kind of a side note, and I'm not trying to get us off track, but something that I realized about this story is that it is in such direct opposition to what David does with Uriah and Bathsheba in 2 Samuel, what we talked about last week. And it's, just completely opposite of what David did when he committed adultery. Okay. And I don't know who needs to hear this, but the one thing that I keep going back to over and over on this whole thing is that here in today, what we're talking about with David and resisting this temptation and not killing Saul when he had the opportunity. You want to talk about some self-control to not do that. As I told you, we're giving David the opportunity to be redeemed today. This all actually happens years before the affair with David and Bathsheba, and then him having Uriah put to death. And so there's just that part of me that was reminded when I was studying and preparing for this, is that we're never past the point where we don't need to be seeking out and trusting the Lord and actively pursuing and leaning into what the Lord is doing in our lives. Because the moment we stop looking for what he is saying about our opportunities and resisting the noise and trusting his timing, those are the moments where we begin to control things again. And you see what happened years later with whenever he fell into the temptation with Bathsheba and then had Uriah killed. There was that moment where he just really struggled. And so just keep that in mind, that we're never past the point of needing the Lord at all times for all of our good. This whole story, I love David. I can't wait till I get to heaven and I can I just want to pick his brain about a whole lot of things. Sometimes I wonder what we'll know and what we won't know whenever we get to heaven. I believe we're going to recognize the saints. I believe we're going to recognize loved ones and others in heaven. And there's a lot of people. I cannot wait to have I've got questions, man. And one of them is going to be to David and say, how did you know that it was not that opportunity? How did you know that you weren't supposed to kill Saul that day? You just know. I don't know. I can't wait to find out, though, what he has to say about that. Okay, so as we're wrapping up, one of the things that I realized when I was thinking about this whole series on control and what all I have learned, there are some things that I think as in my parting gift here. One of the thoughts I had is that surrender is not defeat. Whenever we surrender control to the Lord, that is not defeat. In fact, that's the best win possible. And I've realized too that whenever we let go of trying to control things, I think that that's when we finally really find peace. We're not in angst because we're not outside of God's will trying to, be the puppet master and controlling everything. And I think that that's where a lot of us find peace, is when we are able to just let go and let him handle things. We talked last week about, whenever we've been white knuckling and gripping things, or we've been manipulating, whenever we let go and quit trying to control stuff, that it can feel vulnerable. We can feel like we're naked as a jaybird. I think the example I used last week was whenever my kids were little, and we would always need, like, I don't know what it was, but like there was always, it seemed like when my kids were babies, that there would come this point in the day where they did not want clothes on and they just wanted their diaper, and they just wanted to run around in their diaper for like an hour in the afternoon. I don't know. Did anybody else's kids do this? If they did, please let me know. I would love to know I'm not alone here. But I would say, they're running around naked as a jaybird. And that was just kind of the thing that we said at our house. And so you see what happened was, that prompted something in me. And I started thinking about that exposed feeling, that vulnerable place we get to whenever we finally just let go of everything. Well, all of that prompted what I believe is the next conversation for us. And, this has been such a fun adventure. And when I said yes to talking about control, I really thought it was just a very short break from having some guests on the show. And please don't think I'm not going to have guests on the show anymore. But I am just trusting God to hold whatever it is he wants to talk about on this. And the funnest, coolest thing is that when we were talking about that with the kids and my kids being babies, that phrase naked as a jaybird just kind of kept rolling through my brain. I kept thinking about how beautiful it is when we are living outside of that control, like not out of control, but outside of that need to control, and how that can leave us feeling very vulnerable and naked. Well, I believe there are 5 keys, for us to live our bravest, boldest life. So starting next week, we're going to do that. Then we're going to take a little bit of a break and then come back in August and get the fall semester started off. And I can't wait to see what the Lord does through all of it, y'all. It's going to be amazing. So next week, come and join me. We're going to be talking about the fear of exposure and vulnerability and what that's like. I'm super excited about it. So come back, see me again next week, and we'll get started on just this way of living boldly. I don't know about y'all, but I think that we can, I want to live a life that is bold and unafraid. And even if it feels a little bit naked, that we step into it anyways. I want us to be like that. That's the kind of people I believe the Lord is calling us to be. And so I'm excited for what we are going to study these next 5 weeks, and I cannot wait to see what he holds for it. So I'm going to close us out and then let you get on with your day. Lord, thank you for this day. Thank you for meeting us in this place. Father, thank you that we can learn from David when to seek control, when the timing is right, when to resist what other people are saying, Father, when to listen to wise counsel, but also, Lord, just knowing when you are calling us to take an opportunity and when you are asking us to sit still. And Lord, we don't take that for granted, that you meet us in all of those places and you give us those things. And so I'm grateful for that, Lord. So, so grateful. Lord, go with us into this next week. Show us and keep reminding us of what it is that you are calling us to let go of, to release. And then, Lord, what it is you are calling us to do and act on, and when you are calling us to do and act on the things that you have set before us. Lord, give us your mind, give us your just give us that ability to operate inside of where you hold us. Father, you are so gracious to us. Thank you for teaching us. Lord, that my words are feeble sometimes, God, but man, I sure do love you. Oh, Lord, bring us back together again next week. It is in your name, Jesus, I pray. Amen. Thank you guys so much for being here. And good Lord willing, I will see y'all again next week.